Well, I finished. I made it. I made it through this entire book. Yes, I have completed The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Bakker. I was going to make 2 videos, but the last chapter was very short. Well, very short for this book, I should say. But I'm going to hold my thoughts till the very end because I think it's important to go through these chapter by chapter. So let's start with chapter 18, shall we? This is when we have Emperor Xerius. He's pacing. He's wringing his hands. Why? Because it feels as if they have a spy in their midst, a traitor. And who is that traitor? His name is Skeos, I believe. And he sends Comfast to go summon a Camion because he believes it's an act of sorcery. What has happened to Skeos? And I love this this exchange. So this is when Comfast is leading a Camion to the Emperor, to this, I think it's called the Truth Room or something. If you're wondering, he said with a small, wicked smile, whether this passage leads to the Emperor's dungeon, it does. So I enjoyed that. We knew where he was going. A Camion did not. And so I think from a character standpoint, that's kind of cool. But yes, we've discovered a spy in our midst. The Emperor needs you to verify that sorcery was not involved. Well, what happens? What happens? First, they test his pain threshold. So we have this man. He is chained, and slowly, with the boredom of a craftsman, he wrenched out a toenail. But there was nothing, no shriek, not even a shudder from the old frame. And the old face grinned. More, Xerius. I am more. When Xerius asks him, what are you? It was not Skeos' voice, but something broken, like many voices. And well, what happens next? Well, John Carpenter's The Thing happens next. As though gasping for some deeper breath, Skeos' face unfolded like spider's legs clutched tight about a cold torso. 12 limbs, crowned by a small wicked claws, unclenched and opened, revealing lipless teeth and lidless eyes where a face should have been. Like a woman's long fingers, they embraced the astounded mandate sorcerer about the head and began to squeeze. So we're dealing with a face hugger from Alien, as well as what was reminiscent to me anyway of the scene in John Carpenter's The Thing when the head is crawling around on spider legs. So I have to imagine that Bakker was inspired by one, if not both of those things. And after that interesting scene, we have Esmenet. We're meeting with Esmenet, and she's walking around. She's observing the imminent holy war, all of the encampments and stuff out there, and just kind of taking in the vastness of it all. I think the vastness and the power and the weight of the entire situation is finally coming to her. But she cried for a bit, I'm coming, Akka. So she is searching for a Camion. But something really happens with her at the end of this, and I wasn't sure if she was possessed or if she was being melodramatic or if maybe just her emotional state wasn't being telegraphed to me completely with the text. But she starts regretting the sexual encounter she had with the man in the alleyway. She clearly regrets Sarcellus. And this is when Sarcellus he abandons her, I guess. He says, I've had my fill of you, Esme. And she stared at him, tears traced hot lines across her cheeks. Why was she crying? She didn't love him, did she? So she appears to be a very confused individual, but she starts talking to herself. She has this interior monologue, which again, maybe I missed something. Maybe she's possessed by some kind of demon thing, because it even mentions that it's a voice unlike her own. So I'm not sure if that was symbolic or if that was real. But don't be a fool. Beg, beg. Sarcellus, you wanted this. A voice not quite her own grated. So I'm not sure if this is her turmoil, all of her emotions are kind of just crashing down on her like a massive tidal wave, or if it's this demon or some kind of thing. I have no idea. But this last part of her scene I really enjoyed. She remembered Pirasha, the old harlot she had befriended and lost years ago. Between the tyranny of many and the tyranny of one, Pirasha used to say, harlots chose the many. That's why we're more, she would spit. More than concubines, more than priestesses, more than wives, more even than some queens. We may be oppressed, Esme, but remember, always remember, sweet girl, we're never owned. We spit their seed back at them. We never, never bear its weight. So I know there's been a lot of talk, a lot of controversy about the treatment of women in this book or this entire series. I've only read this book, so I can't speak to anything else. But I love this, right? Because within this community, right, this profession, they have pride, right? They have their own sense of pride, and they can separate themselves from the upper class, at least what most people consider the upper class. And maybe it's a way for them to cope. But either way, I like that this woman is giving her a reason to hope, a reason to value herself, despite her profession. And as though from rising from a stupor, she pushed herself from the ground, stiff, slow. "Oh, Esme, you're getting old. Not good for a whore." And she began walking. That brings us to the end of chapter 18. Short and sweet, some crazy stuff happened. Skeos his head turned into a face hugger, apparently. And then Esme parted ways with Sarcellus and had a breakdown of sorts, I assume. I don't know, but let's talk about chapter 19, the final chapter. And it begins with Nair having his way with Serway. The Sylvendi racked her with his hunger, his countenance fierce and famished. Serway felt his shudder, as though through stone, then watched dully as he abandoned his appetite and rolled back into the tented darkness. "Why do you let him use me like this? I belong to you." So this is kind of weird. Kellis is like hanging out in the same tent where this is going on. So he's off in the corner looking at this book, and they're banging. But she's wondering why Kellis is allowing him to do this to her, and he flat out tells her a little bit later in the chapter that she belongs to him. And she still carried his baby, Kellis's baby. That was the important thing. Really? She seems to be a little bit deluded. But again, we all know that Kellis is the Jesus figure so far, so it makes sense. But Kellis would be the violent hero of this unwritten scripture. She knew this. With inexplicable certainty, she knew this. So even she is thinking that he is going to be a big deal when it comes to whatever events are going to unfold with the rest of the series. And he tells her, even your suffering has a crucial role to play, that she does have meaning. I mean something. And it's pretty sad because she wants nothing more than to worship him, to belong to him, I guess. And this is what she's grasping onto, these very demeaning, you could argue, words. And she says to herself, yes, I mean something. And then he responds with, more than you can imagine, he whispered. But wait a second. She thought those words. And he responded with dialogue as if he heard him. Interesting. And he cries as well. She cries too. He cries for me. And this is when Kellis says, you belong to him, he said at last. You are his prize. But what happens next? She comes on to him and he relents. And at last, he relented. Gasping beneath him, she looked into the dark corner where the Sylvendi lay, knowing that he could see the rapture on her face, on their faces. And she cried out as she climaxed, a cry of hatred. So she's getting him back in her own way. And Nair's pissed. Yes, he's very angry about this. He starts to question exactly who Kellis is, right? What could this imply? What if Kellis was not an assassin sent to murder his father, as he had claimed, but a spy sent to do his father's bidding? Interesting. Yeah, nobody knows. Kellis is just like this random dude that shows up, and people are like, cool with it, I guess. But internally, he also echoes Kellis' statement. She's my prize, he cried voicelessly. My prize. And then we're left with a Camion, and what is he doing? He is drawing lines between the consult, the emperor, and even Kellis to try to figure out a connection of what's going on here. But at the end, he is still dreaming of Esme. And the very end of this chapter, it's such a weird way to end a chapter. And I can see, knowing that Bakker writes in such a way, heavy exposition a lot of the time, he seems to value the historical nature of the world he's creating, which is funny because he does zoom the camera down, really closely. Like I said, I think a Camion and Esmenet are probably some of the best character building from an emotional standpoint for me to empathize with these people and get invested with them that I've read in probably any fantasy novel. But on the flip side, he pulls the camera way back to the point where I kind of zone out. I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to create this epic camera shot, right? You see all of these elements, these factions coming together and about ready to war, but I don't know. I feel like it was a weird way to end a book. So reading this novel, I wasn't sure how it was going to end. I wasn't sure if it was going to be, work as a standalone. I feel like it has its own arc. It does not. It feels more like it's part of a bigger story, which of course I know it is. But what's always bothered me with series, especially in fantasy, is that A lot of the writers, they don't know how to create a standalone volume. Now, I understand it's part of a series, right? It's going to continue. This is only a chunk of the story. But this to me feels more like the Fellowship of the Ring. And we all know that Tolkien intended The Lord of the Rings to be one book, not 3 books. It was broken up into 3 books. That's what this feels like so far to me. There's a lot of great stuff I enjoyed about this book. It's kind of a mixed bag though. And not to say it's poorly written in any regard, just that for my own personal taste, I like more of the character work. I like less of the bird's eye view kind of stuff going on. But yeah, that is the end of the darkness that comes before this reading vlog of mine. I'm not sure when I'm going to get into the second book. I think I need a break. I don't think I can read books like this back to back. And I think that's another thing I'd like to say about this book is I really enjoyed structurally how he composed the chapters. And that's kind of another mystery to me as to why this book does not feel like it can work on its own. It only feels like part of a larger series, which of course it is he structured the chapters pretty well. They almost felt like their own little short stories. Now granted, most, if not all these chapters were about 40 to 50 pages long, so that is quite a long short story. But I could tell when reading those that Bakker understood story construction, story structure. However, with this singular volume, it feels like a misstep a little bit. It feels like he didn't take that structural knowledge from the chapter level to the book level, which is kind of weird. I don't know, it's kind of weird. But yeah, overall, pretty good. I would, off the top of my head, I'd probably give it maybe a 7 out of 10 right now. There's some things I liked about it, some things I didn't like about it. And honestly, I never felt myself really drawn to continue reading. Once I got to the end of a chapter, I was like, I need a break. I need a break. I was never really sucked in to want to continue. And I think that's just a difference of opinion. Normally when I read other genres of books, chapters are constructed in such a way that kind of keep you wanting to move on. They give you like these little potato chip sized chapters that are addictive. Whereas Bakker's chapters are more like a really big steak dinner. You're very satiated at the end, at least I was. I didn't feel the desire to continue. I felt like once I ended a chapter, it was a good stopping point for the day, maybe a couple of days, and then come back to it. But I will stop rambling now. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do another reading vlog for the second volume, but if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments below or like the video. Otherwise, maybe when I read it, I'll just do a traditional review. And I'll probably do a review for this one. I'm gonna let it sink in a little bit before I get into that video though. But all of you, thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you all the new people who joined. I figured some new subscribers would be along because I know this this series has quite the following, quite the cult following. I don't think it's like a huge book or anything like that. But anyway, I know I said I'd stop rambling and here I am continuing to ramble. But all of you out there, I appreciate the comments. All of you seasoned veterans, as I like to call you, because it was a great learning experience for me. It was a great way to see the book in a different perspective through different eyes, through eyes that have read the entire series. And again, I also appreciate the fact that you did not spoil it for me or anybody else who might be reading along with this series. So thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye.